He was a boy who seemed ordinary to everyone who met him. He walked the streets of his small town like any other child, carrying a backpack slightly too big for his shoulders and a notebook that contained doodles more than anything else. His clothes were simple, nothing fancy, and he never spoke loudly in public, preferring to observe the world around him quietly. People often overlooked him because he didn't demand attention, but there was something quietly special about him, something that only a few would notice if they looked closely. At home, he had a small piano tucked into a corner of the living room. It was an old piano, slightly out of tune and scratched from years of use, but to him it was magical. The moment his fingers touched the keys, everything else in the world faded. He could spend hours pressing the black and white keys, exploring sounds that made him smile or made him feel something he couldn't put into words. No one really expected much from a boy who was so quiet and shy, but this piano became his secret world, a place where he could be himself. His mornings started like any other child's. He would wake up to the sound of birds outside his window and the hum of the street below. Breakfast was usually simple, and he often ate alone, lost in thoughts about what he would do that day or melodies he had dreamed up the night before. School was a mixture of routine and subtle discoveries. He wasn't the fastest runner in the playground or the loudest in class, but he was curious. He would watch the way sunlight fell on the pages of a book, the way people smiled, and even the rhythm of footsteps on the pavement. He noticed things others ignored, and somehow this attention to detail fed into the music he played. No one at school paid much attention to him. He sat in the back of the classroom, listening more than speaking, absorbing every lesson quietly. He enjoyed reading about faraway places and listening to stories about people doing extraordinary things. But no one knew he had a talent hiding in his fingers, a talent that was slowly growing every day in the solitude of his small room. He would practice after school not because anyone asked him to, but because it felt natural. The piano didn't judge him. It didn't expect applause or recognition. It simply allowed him to express himself in ways words could not. At first, his playing was simple. He learned basic tunes from books and sometimes tried to mimic songs he heard on the radio. His fingers stumbled, often pressing wrong notes or pausing awkwardly in the middle of a tune, but he never gave up. He felt a sense of joy each time he managed to get a part of the song right. His parents noticed he spent long hours at the piano, but they didn't push him or make him feel pressured. They only encouraged him gently, saying, "Play what makes you happy." And that small piece of advice was enough to keep him motivated. On weekends, he sometimes played for the neighbors when they came by. First, it was just a polite gesture. He would play a simple melody while they sipped tea or coffee. But gradually, people started to notice something unusual. Even with simple tunes, there was a depth in the way he played. The notes seemed to carry emotion beyond what the songs were meant to express. Some neighbors would pause and listen longer than expected, exchanging glances of surprise. They whispered quietly to each other, saying, "There's something special about that boy." But no one fully understood what made him different. He had a few friends at school, children who were curious like him but not as focused on music. They would play games outside, run across the fields, and laugh until their faces were red. He enjoyed their company, but often, he would sneak away to the piano, feeling a pull he could not resist. Music had become more than a hobby. It was part of who he was. It gave him a sense of comfort and control, a way to navigate a world that sometimes felt confusing and loud. Sometimes, he would hear stories about famous musicians on the radio or on television. He would listen with wide eyes and imagine himself on stage, performing in front of thousands, though he never shared these thoughts with anyone. It was a secret dream, tucked away behind the quiet exterior that everyone else saw. But he believed in it, even if it was just a tiny spark of hope. One rainy afternoon, when the streets were empty and the world seemed gray, he sat at the piano with the window slightly open. Drops of rain tapped gently on the glass, and he began to play. At first, it was a simple melody he had learned recently, but slowly he improvised. He let his fingers wander, creating notes and rhythms he had never heard before. It was as if the rain inspired him, as if every drop added emotion to the music. By the time he stopped, he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He realized that he was creating something unique, something that came entirely from him. That moment planted a seed, a feeling that perhaps one day, others might notice what he was capable of. Life continued quietly, but there were small moments that hinted at his growing talent. A teacher asked him to play a short piece during a school event, and though he was nervous, he agreed. When he played, there was a pause in the room, a collective inhaling of breath from the audience. The notes filled the air with a beauty that was unexpected from a boy who was usually so quiet and unassuming. Some people whispered to each other, astonished that someone so young could play with such feeling. That day, he didn't fully understand what had happened, but he felt a shift inside him. Music was no longer just a private escape. It had the power to touch others, even in a small way. Despite these small successes, he remained humble and focused. He didn't boast or seek attention. His joy came from playing, from exploring new melodies, and from feeling the music flow through him. He continued to observe the world, noticing small details that influenced the way he expressed himself at the piano. Every experience, every emotion, was captured in the notes he played, making each performance more meaningful than the last. At home, his parents sometimes watched him with quiet pride. They didn't push him toward competitions or fame, but they offered gentle encouragement. "You have something special," they would say. "Keep doing what makes you happy." Their support was steady but unobtrusive, giving him the freedom to grow naturally. He appreciated that more than words could express. As the boy grew, his skills became more apparent. His fingers moved with precision and confidence, and he began to understand music in ways that went beyond technique. He felt emotion in each note, telling stories without words. He could make people laugh, cry, or reflect simply through the music he created. His talent was becoming undeniable, though he remained the same humble boy who loved observing the world and finding inspiration in simple moments. Even though he was still just a boy in the eyes of the town, there were whispers now. People started to talk quietly about the boy at the piano, the one who could play with such depth and feeling. Some were curious, others were amazed, but no one yet realized how far his talent would go. It was a secret held by a few neighbors, a few teachers, and of course by the boy himself. He spent many evenings at the piano, sometimes imagining a future he wasn't ready to speak aloud. He dreamed of playing in big halls, sharing music with people who would feel what he felt, but he didn't rush. Each day, each practice was a step toward something bigger. He understood that talent alone was not enough. It required patience, dedication, and heart. And so, the ordinary boy at the piano continued to live his quiet life. He went to school, played with friends, observed the world, and most importantly, played music whenever he could. Every note, every melody, every improvised tune was a reflection of his soul, a secret that would one day astonish everyone who truly listened. For now, he remained just a boy with a piano, unaware of the incredible journey that lay ahead, a journey that would soon capture the hearts of those around him in ways he could never have imagined. Over time, the boy's connection with the piano grew stronger. What had once been a simple curiosity became a deep part of who he was. He no longer played just to pass the time. He played to express emotions that he could not say in words. His mornings were still like any other child's, but his afternoons and evenings were spent exploring the piano with a seriousness that seemed unusual for someone his age. Sometimes he would spend hours experimenting, trying to figure out how to make a melody sound exactly the way he imagined it in his mind. One day, his music teacher at school noticed him tapping away on a tiny keyboard in the classroom during free time. She had always known he was quiet, perhaps too quiet, but when she listened to the melody he had been creating, she stopped in her tracks. The notes were simple, but there was a kind of emotion in them that felt mature, almost beyond his years. She asked him to play for her after class, and he hesitated, feeling shy and unsure, but he agreed. When he sat at the piano and played, she listened in silence, a smile spreading across her face. There was a spark there, a natural ability, something rare and compelling. She realized that this boy was not just a casual learner. He had a gift that could grow into something remarkable. Encouraged by the teacher's gentle praise, he began to practice more deliberately. He started learning new songs from books, listening to recordings of great pianists, and trying to replicate the techniques he heard. First, it was difficult. Some pieces were too complex, some notes too fast. He would stumble, hit wrong keys, and feel frustrated, but he refused to give up. Each time he struggled, he would pause, think about what went wrong, and try again. Slowly, the mistakes became fewer, and his confidence grew. He began to see progress not just in the sound he produced but in the way his fingers moved, smoother and more precise with each day of practice. His parents noticed the change too. They could see the determination in his eyes and the concentration in his face. He wasn't playing just for fun anymore, he was focused, committed. They didn't pressure him or demand results, but they encouraged him quietly, reminding him that he could achieve anything if he kept working. Their support was steady, like the soft background music of a life that nurtured him without overwhelming him. They allowed him to follow his passion at his own pace, giving him the freedom to grow naturally. Soon, small opportunities began to appear. A school event was coming up, and the teacher suggested he play a piece in front of the class. First, the boy felt nervous. He had never played in front of many people before. His hands shook slightly as he sat at the piano, and his heart raced. But as soon as he began to play, something remarkable happened. The music flowed from him effortlessly. He felt every note, every rhythm, and the room seemed to fall silent. His classmates listened with wide eyes, some leaning forward, others holding their breath. When he finished, the applause was soft but genuine. For him, it was not about the praise but about the realization that his music could touch others. It was a small moment, but it left a lasting impression. This performance sparked something in him. He wanted to play more, to share more, to see what he could do when he faced a larger audience. He began to seek out challenges, small competitions and recitals in the community. Each event was a chance to learn and grow. Sometimes he won, sometimes he didn't, but each time he gained experience and confidence. He discovered that performing was different from practicing alone. There was pressure, yes, but there was also a thrill, a sense of connection with people who were listening to the story he told through his music. As he continued to practice and perform, his style started to develop. He didn't just play the notes on the page. He added his own emotions, his own touches. A simple song could sound entirely different when he played it, filled with nuances that made listeners feel something new. People began to notice. Neighbors would stop by unexpectedly, curious about the soft music drifting from his window. Friends from school would pause on the street, listening in amazement. Even strangers in the town who had heard about the boy's talent would come to hear him play. They all commented on how unusual it was for someone so young to have such expressive ability. And the boy began to realize that his music had a kind of power, one that could reach beyond his small world. Despite the growing attention, he remained humble. He never let praise distract him from the joy of playing. He practiced daily, often alone, experimenting with new melodies and techniques. Some days were frustrating, filled with mistakes and missed notes, but those days were just as important as the successful ones. He learned patience, discipline, and the importance of perseverance. Every challenge he faced made him stronger, more confident in his abilities. The boy also began to understand that music was about more than just skill. It was about emotion, about telling a story without words. He would spend hours thinking about how a song made him feel and how he could make others feel the same way. Sometimes he would imagine a story in his mind, a scene, a memory, a feeling, and then try to capture it on the piano. This approach made his playing unique and compelling. People could hear not just notes but emotions, and that made a deep impression on anyone who listened. Occasionally, he faced doubts. He wondered if he was truly talented or if he was just lucky to play a few notes well. He would compare himself to famous pianists and feel inadequate. But then he remembered why he played in the first place. Music was his way of expressing himself, of connecting with something bigger than himself. The doubts never disappeared entirely, but they became part of the process, pushing him to work harder, to explore more, to grow. His growing talent also brought new experiences. He met other young musicians and shared ideas with them. Sometimes he would collaborate, learning from others, discovering new techniques, and expanding his understanding of music. These interactions broadened his perspective and helped him see that the journey of learning and performing was ongoing, never truly complete. He realized that talent alone was not enough. Curiosity, dedication, and passion were equally important. One afternoon, during a community gathering, he was invited to play in front of a larger audience. He was nervous, but he accepted. As he sat at the piano, he took a deep breath and let the music flow. The audience was captivated. People whispered to each other, astonished by the depth and emotion in his playing. Some were moved to tears, others to quiet reflection. In that moment, the boy understood something profound. His music had the power to touch hearts, to inspire, and to astonish. It was no longer just a private escape. It was a gift he could share with the world. After that performance, more opportunities began to appear. Teachers recommended him for events, neighbors invited him to community gatherings, and people started talking about the boy who played the piano like an artist far beyond his years. He still remained humble, practicing daily, exploring new melodies, and learning from every experience. He knew that the journey had only just begun, and that there was so much more to discover. The boy also became aware of the responsibility that came with his talent. He didn't play to show off or to seek approval. He played to express himself and to connect with others. This understanding guided him through every practice, every performance, and every new challenge. He learned that music was not just about notes or technique. It was about heart, soul, and the stories that only he could tell through the piano. Through these experiences, the boy grew in confidence and skill. He discovered that dedication and patience could turn a simple interest into a remarkable talent. He saw that perseverance and love for his craft could lead to moments that astonished others and himself. And most importantly, he realized that music was a journey, one that could continue to inspire and move people for years to come. As days turned into months, the boy's relationship with the piano deepened. He practiced with purpose, performed with heart, and approached every note with care. His talent was becoming undeniable, and yet he remained the same quiet, thoughtful child who found joy in simple melodies and small observations. He understood that his gift was not just for recognition but for connection, for touching the hearts of those who listened. By now, it was clear to anyone who saw him play that he was not just a boy with a piano. He was a young musician, growing, learning, and preparing for a future that held possibilities beyond imagination. And though the journey was just beginning, there was a sense that something extraordinary was on the horizon, waiting to astonish everyone who would hear him play. The ordinary boy who once played in solitude was slowly becoming someone whose music could change the way people felt and thought, one note at a time. The boy's journey with the piano was no longer just about learning songs and enjoying the music. Soon, he was faced with challenges that tested not only his skill, but also his courage and determination. One day, his teacher announced a regional talent competition. It was a prestigious event, one where children from nearby towns would perform in front of judges, teachers, and an audience that expected something extraordinary. The boy felt a mix of excitement and fear. He had never performed on such a large stage before. The thought of many people watching him made his stomach twist into knots. He wanted to do well, but doubt began to creep in. Was he truly ready for this? In the days leading up to the competition, he practiced more than ever. He spent hours at the piano, repeating difficult sections, perfecting every note, and trying to convey emotion in a way that would move people. Sometimes his fingers hurt, and sometimes he made mistakes that frustrated him deeply. He would stop, take a deep breath, and start again, refusing to give up. His parents noticed the strain and tried to offer comfort, telling him it was okay to feel nervous and that effort mattered more than winning. These words helped, but he could not shake the feeling that this was a defining moment, a chance to show what he could do. The night before the competition, he could hardly sleep. His mind replayed every melody, every note, every moment he had practiced. He imagined the audience watching him, the judges scrutinizing every move, and his heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and fear. When morning came, he got dressed carefully, packed his sheet music, and held his small backpack tightly. He tried to calm himself by thinking of the music as a friend, a companion that would help him through the challenge. But the anxiety still lingered. When he arrived at the competition hall, the sheer size of the place and the number of children waiting to perform was overwhelming. He saw other boys and girls who seemed confident, some practicing quickly, others whispering to each other. The boy felt small in comparison. He found a quiet corner and sat down, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to focus. He reminded himself that he had worked hard, that he loved the music, and that the piano was a part of him. That thought gave him a tiny spark of courage. Finally, it was his turn. He walked onto the stage, his hands slightly trembling. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but he could feel the attention of everyone in the room. He sat at the piano and took a deep breath. For a moment, he hesitated, feeling the weight of expectation, but then he began to play. The first notes were tentative, soft, almost unsure. But as he continued, something remarkable happened. He became lost in the music. The melody flowed naturally from his fingers, carrying with it emotion and feeling. Every note he played seemed to fill the room, connecting with the audience in a way he had never experienced before. The boy played with a mix of precision and heart. He remembered all the hours he had spent practicing, the nights he had stayed up, the moments of frustration and joy. Every emotion he had ever felt seemed to pour out through the keys. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth and purity of his music. Some listeners closed their eyes, swaying slightly to the rhythm. Others held their breath, mesmerized by the boy's skill. He was not just performing a song. He was telling a story of his journey, of his love for music, and of his determination to overcome fear. When he finished, there was a moment of silence that felt eternal. Then the audience erupted into applause. The boy's heart raced, a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. He had done it. He had faced his fear and shared his music with a crowd larger than any he had ever played for. Judges nodded, impressed by his performance, and whispered to each other. Some had tears in their eyes. The boy smiled shyly, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. He realized that the hardest part had been stepping onto the stage and trusting himself. The music had guided him and he had followed. After the performance, the boy returned to the quiet corner where he had waited. He felt a sense of calm wash over him. He had faced a significant challenge and had emerged stronger. The experience taught him that fear was not something to be ashamed of but something to confront. He understood that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. This realization became an important part of his growth, shaping the way he approached music and life. In the days that followed, the boy received praise and recognition from teachers, friends, and family. People talked about the emotion in his playing, how he made a simple melody feel profound, how he connected with the audience in a way that seemed beyond his age. Yet he remained humble. He knew that this was just one step in a long journey. There would be more challenges, more stages, more competitions. But he also knew that he had discovered something powerful within himself, a confidence and resilience that would carry him forward. The boy's growing recognition brought new responsibilities. He was invited to perform at other events, sometimes in unfamiliar places, often in front of strangers who had high expectations. Each new opportunity was both exciting and intimidating. He learned to prepare carefully, to focus on the music rather than the audience, and to embrace the lessons in every experience. Some performances went perfectly, others had small mistakes, but he learned from everyone. The process of overcoming challenges became a rhythm in his life, one that he approached with patience and determination. Through all of this, the boy continued to practice alone in his room. He experimented with new techniques, composed his own melodies, and explored the emotional depth of each piece he learned. He understood that true mastery was not about perfection but about expression. Each note, each pause, each rhythm had a purpose. Music was not just a collection of sounds. It was a language, a way to communicate feelings that words could not capture. The boy's relationship with the piano deepened with each practice, each performance, each moment of reflection. Despite his success, he faced moments of doubt and frustration. There were days when a piece seemed impossible to play, when his fingers refused to cooperate, and when he wondered if he would ever reach the level he imagined. But he remembered the lessons from the competition: courage, perseverance, and trust in oneself. He pushed through the difficulties, practicing patiently, repeating sections, breaking down challenges into smaller steps. Every small victory reinforced his belief that hard work and dedication could overcome obstacles. The boy also began to notice how his music affected others. People would approach him after performances, telling him how a particular song made them feel, how it reminded them of memories or emotions they had long forgotten. These reactions amazed him. He realized that his talent was not just a personal gift but something that could touch lives. This understanding brought a new sense of purpose to his practice and performances. Music was no longer just a private escape. It was a bridge between him and the world, a way to connect with people on a deep and emotional level. Over time, the boy's journey taught him more than just musical skill. He learned discipline, patience, and resilience. He understood the importance of facing challenges, of taking risks, and of embracing uncertainty. He discovered that growth came from effort, not just talent, and that true success was about persistence, courage, and the joy of expression. These lessons shaped him as both a musician and a person, giving him confidence and clarity about who he was and what he could achieve. As the boy looked ahead, he knew that the road would not always be easy. There would be more competitions, more stages, more expectations. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and challenges he could not yet imagine. But he also knew that he had discovered an inner strength, a love for music, and a resilience that would guide him. Every performance, every practice session, every moment of struggle was part of a journey that would eventually lead to something extraordinary. The boy's story was no longer just about a quiet child with a piano. It was about courage, growth, and the power of music to transform fear into confidence, doubt into determination, and silence into expression. Each challenge he faced, each performance he gave, was a step toward a future that promised astonishment, not just for the audience but for himself as well. He had learned that true talent was not measured by skill alone but by the willingness to face challenges, embrace learning, and pour one's heart into every note. The boy had faced many challenges, but nothing could have prepared him for the most important performance of his young life. A national music festival had invited him to play, and the event promised to be watched by people from across the country. The idea of performing in front of such a large audience filled him with a mixture of fear and excitement. He felt the weight of expectation pressing on his shoulders, but he also knew that this was a chance to show the world what he could do. He had worked tirelessly for this moment, and now it had arrived. The day of the festival, the boy woke early, his heart pounding in his chest. He dressed carefully and packed his sheet music, checking it over several times. His parents, calm and supportive, reminded him to breathe and to focus on the music rather than the crowd. Their gentle words helped, but he could still feel the nervous energy building. When they arrived at the festival hall, the boy was struck by its size. The stage was enormous, the lights bright and glaring, and the seats were filled with people. He felt small, almost invisible, yet he knew that what mattered was the music and the story he wanted to tell through it. Backstage, other children were preparing too. Some were practicing quietly, while others seemed completely at ease. The boy watched them for a moment, feeling both intimidated and inspired. He reminded himself that each performer had their own path, and that his journey had been unique. He closed his eyes, imagining the piano waiting for him on the stage, and he took a deep breath, allowing the familiar comfort of the music to calm his nerves. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause, and the bright lights made it hard to see anything beyond the first few rows. His hands shook slightly as he sat at the piano, but he focused on the keys, on the music he had practiced so many times. For a moment he hesitated, feeling the pressure, but then he let go. He began to play. From the very first note, it was clear that this performance was unlike any other. His fingers moved with precision and grace, each note flowing seamlessly into the next. The music was not just correct. It was alive, full of emotion and expression. The boy poured every feeling he had into the performance. The excitement, the fear, the joy, and the countless hours of practice that had brought him here. The audience was silent, captivated by the beauty and depth of the music. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, as if trying to take in every note. Others closed their eyes, allowing the music to wash over them, feeling the story unfold in the melody. As the performance continued, the boy became completely absorbed in the music. Time seemed to stand still. He was no longer aware of the audience, the lights, or the grandeur of the festival. There was only the piano, the melody, and the emotions that he was sharing through each key. He played with a confidence that surprised even him, a natural ability to communicate feelings that could not be expressed in words. The audience could feel it, a connection that transcended age, experience, and expectation. He reached the climax of the piece, a part he had worked on for weeks. The notes were complex, demanding both skill and focus, yet he played them effortlessly. The room seemed to hold its breath as he performed each phrase with intention and heart. Every sound resonated, echoing through the hall, leaving listeners in awe. Some people were moved to tears, others to silent admiration, and all were astonished by the depth and maturity of his playing. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, and the boy delivered it with grace and artistry beyond his years. When the final note rang out, there was a brief moment of stunned silence. Then the hall erupted into applause and cheers, louder than anything the boy had ever experienced. He looked up, seeing faces filled with amazement, joy, and respect. He felt a rush of relief and pride, mixed with disbelief. He had done it. He had faced the most significant challenge of his life and emerged not just successful, but extraordinary. The judges stood, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. The audience continued to cheer, giving him a standing ovation. The boy's heart swelled with emotion, knowing that his music had touched so many people in such a profound way. After the performance, people came forward to congratulate him. Teachers, musicians, and strangers alike praised his talent, dedication, and the emotional depth of his music. They spoke of how young he was, how unusual it was to see such a connection to the music, and how inspiring it had been to watch him play. Yet the boy remained humble. He thanked them quietly, focusing not on the praise but on the experience itself. The joy of sharing his music, the thrill of connecting with an audience, and the satisfaction of knowing he had given his best performance. This performance became a turning point in the boy's life. He realized that his music had the power to astonish, to move, and to inspire. It was no longer just a private passion or a hobby. It was a gift he could share with the world. The experience filled him with confidence and a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that talent alone was not enough. It required courage, practice, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. He also realized that every note he played carried a story, a piece of himself that could resonate with others. In the days that followed, the boy's life began to change. People talked about the young pianist who had astonished everyone at the national festival. Invitations to perform came from schools, community events, and even local media. Teachers encouraged him to continue pursuing his passion, and neighbors and friends expressed pride and admiration. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and humility, understanding that this was just the beginning of a journey that would require continued effort, dedication, and love for the music. Despite the newfound attention, he remained grounded. He continued to practice daily, exploring new melodies, improving his technique, and expressing himself through the piano. He understood that each performance was a chance to grow, learn, and connect with others. He also remembered the lessons from previous challenges, the importance of perseverance, patience, and trust in oneself. These lessons guided him as he navigated this new phase of his journey, helping him maintain focus and humility despite the applause and recognition. The boy also began to understand the emotional power of music more deeply. He noticed how different pieces affected people in different ways, how a single note could evoke memories, feelings, and reactions. This realization inspired him to experiment further, to create his own compositions that told stories and expressed emotions uniquely his own. He spent hours at the piano, composing, revising, and refining, always seeking to communicate something genuine and heartfelt through his music. As time passed, the boy's confidence and skill continued to grow. Each performance, whether large or small, became an opportunity to challenge himself, learn, and share his passion. He discovered that music was not just about talent or recognition, but about connection, expression, and the joy of creating something meaningful. The experience of astonishing an audience had shown him the impact his music could have, but it also reminded him that the journey was ongoing, filled with opportunities to learn, improve, and inspire. Through it all, the boy remained true to himself. He did not seek fame or attention for its own sake. He played because it brought him joy, comfort, and purpose. He understood that every challenge, every performance, and every moment of practice was part of a larger story. A story of growth, discovery, and the transformative power of music. And he knew that, no matter what came next, the piano would always be there, a faithful companion and a source of endless inspiration. The National Festival became a memory that stayed with the boy, a defining moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. It showed him what was possible when talent, dedication, and courage came together. It demonstrated the astonishing power of music to touch hearts and change lives. And it reinforced a simple truth, that even a quiet, ordinary boy could create something extraordinary when he followed his passion with all his heart. As he continued to play, perform, and explore the depths of his musical abilities, the boy carried with him the lessons of that unforgettable performance. He understood that the journey was just as important as the destination, that challenges were opportunities for growth, and that music was a gift meant to be shared. And though he was still young, still learning, and still growing, he had already begun to leave a mark on the world. A mark of beauty, emotion, and astonishment that would stay with those who heard him for a lifetime. After the festival, the boy's life took a turn that felt both exciting and overwhelming. He was still the same quiet child who loved music, yet suddenly, he found himself in the spotlight. People began to recognize him on the streets, teachers praised him more openly, and invitations to perform kept arriving. It was a lot to take in, but the boy approached it with the same calm focus that had carried him this far. He understood that while recognition was gratifying, the real joy came from playing and connecting with people through his music. He continued practicing every day, not because he had to, but because it brought him a sense of purpose and happiness. Each morning, he would wake up and imagine melodies in his mind, sometimes inspired by the simplest things, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of rain, or the laughter of children outside. Every sound, every emotion became material for his music. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a way to capture the world around him and to express what words could not. As his skill grew, he was invited to perform at more events, some local and some further away. Each performance was an opportunity to challenge himself, to see how far his abilities could take him, and to reach new people with his music. While the audience sizes varied, he treated each performance with the same care and dedication. He knew that music was about connection, not just applause. He wanted each listener to feel something genuine, whether it was joy, reflection, or inspiration. And time again, he succeeded. The boy also began composing his own pieces. He would sit at the piano and let his imagination guide him, turning thoughts and emotions into melodies that were entirely his own. Some pieces were playful, filled with light and energy. Others were slower, more reflective, carrying a sense of longing or hope. When he played these compositions, people were astonished not only by his technique but by the depth of feeling and the stories embedded in the music. He had become more than a performer. He was now a storyteller, using the piano to convey experiences and emotions that touched hearts. Despite his growing reputation, he remained grounded. He still spent time observing the world quietly, noticing small details that others overlooked. These observations continued to inspire his music. He spent time with friends and family, enjoying ordinary moments that reminded him of what was truly important. He learned that balance was key, pursuing greatness in his art while remaining connected to the simple joys of life. His humility made people admire him even more. No matter how many performances he gave or how much recognition he received, he remained the same boy who loved the piano for the pure joy of playing. With each performance, he noticed how people reacted differently. Some were moved to tears, some felt inspired, and some simply smiled, feeling a spark of happiness. These reactions taught him something profound. Music had the power to touch lives in ways that words could not. It could bridge gaps between people, evoke emotions buried deep within, and leave lasting impressions. The boy realized that his gift was not just a personal joy but a way to make a positive impact on others. This understanding deepened his dedication and passion. Over time, he faced new challenges. Some events were more demanding than others, requiring him to play in unfamiliar spaces, adapt to new pianos, or handle unexpected situations. Occasionally, he would make mistakes, miss a note, or feel nervous. But he had learned to embrace these moments as part of the journey. Mistakes became lessons, challenges became opportunities, and nerves became a signal that he cared deeply about his music. Every performance, whether perfect or imperfect, contributed to his growth and confidence. The boy's parents continued to support him quietly. They never pressured him or tried to control his path. Instead, they encouraged him to explore, to experiment, and to find joy in the process. Their steady presence provided him with a foundation of love and reassurance, allowing him to take risks and embrace opportunities without fear. They celebrated his successes and comforted him in moments of doubt, teaching him that both triumphs and setbacks were part of a meaningful life. As the boy grew older, his love for the piano remained constant. He discovered that music was a lifelong journey, one that required patience, curiosity, and dedication. He continued to explore new styles, learn new techniques, and challenge himself creatively. Each new experience enriched his understanding of music and deepened his connection to it. He began mentoring younger children who shared his passion, passing on lessons not just about skill but about courage, perseverance, and the joy of creating something meaningful. The boy also realized that the impact of his music extended beyond individual performances. People remembered the melodies he played, the emotions they felt, and the inspiration he sparked. He received letters and messages from listeners who shared how his music had helped them through difficult times or brought them moments of joy. These stories touched him deeply and reminded him why he pursued music in the first place. It was not about fame or awards. It was about connecting with others, touching lives, and leaving a positive mark on the world. Despite the attention and recognition, the boy remained humble and introspective. He never sought to impress others for its own sake. Instead, he focused on expressing himself honestly through the piano, trusting that genuine emotion and effort would resonate naturally. This authenticity became the hallmark of his performances, distinguishing him from others and creating a profound impact on his audiences. People admired not just his technical skill but the sincerity and heart behind every note. As years passed, the boy became more confident in his abilities and more aware of his responsibilities as a musician. He understood that talent was not a gift to hoard but a responsibility to nurture and share. He continued performing, composing, and mentoring, always striving to grow as an artist and as a person. He remained mindful of the journey, appreciating each step and recognizing that growth was ongoing. Even as he achieved success, he knew that there was always more to learn, more to express, and more ways to connect with people through music. Looking back, the boy understood that his journey had been shaped by many small moments. Hours spent practicing alone, challenges faced in competitions, moments of doubt, and opportunities seized with courage. Each experience contributed to the person he had become and the musician he was growing into. He realized that the extraordinary moments, the ones that astonished audiences and inspired others, were built on countless ordinary moments of dedication, reflection, and love for the craft. The boy's story became an inspiration to many. He showed that even someone quiet and unassuming could achieve remarkable things through passion, perseverance, and sincerity. His journey demonstrated that talent alone was not enough. It required courage, patience, and a willingness to embrace challenges. Most importantly, it showed that following one's passion with honesty and dedication could touch lives, create lasting memories, and astonish those who witnessed it. In the end, the boy continued to play the piano, exploring new melodies, composing new pieces, and performing with heart and soul. He understood that music was a lifelong companion, a source of joy, expression, and connection. Each note he played carried a piece of himself, a story to share, and an opportunity to inspire. And though he was still growing, still learning, and still discovering new aspects of his talent, he had already begun to leave an indelible mark on the world. A mark of beauty, emotion, and inspiration that would be remembered by all who listened.